Hey, Steve Magnante here at High Octane Classics in Auburn, Massachusetts, doing another high octane walk around with a 1969 Camaro. And I don't know about you, but Camaros are kind of America's great blank slate. What do I mean by that? Well, in stock trim, they're awesome. An SS396, something like that. But a six-cylinder Camaro back in '69 wasn't that exciting. So a lot of folks modify them. In other words, it's a blank slate to be hot rodded. And that's what we have right here in a really good way. Now the front fenders on this have Camaro logos, of course. There's no Z28, no SS. But on the hood, we see 383. Now, we all know that, yes, that's a Mopar number, but in the aftermarket, 383 is the result of taking a 400 cubic inch crank and a 350 block, merging them, and getting the high-winding 383. So this is definitely a hot rod, and that's just fine. We have to ask ourselves, how was it born? Well, to do that, we go to the VIN, and here we see a 1, 2, 3. So the 3 in the third spot tells us this was born a six-cylinder car, probably a 250, and that's okay, maybe a 230. If we see a 124, that would tell us it was originally a V8 car. Now the interesting thing about Chevrolet Camaros is that even though this is a six-cylinder car, it has V8 suspension with 5 lug wheels. Now if this was a Ford Mustang in 1969, check this out. The base 200 cubic inch six-banger would have 4 lug wheels. No kidding, stuff right off the Falcon assembly line. If you got the 250 six-banger in a Mustang, you got the 5 lug wheels. But Chevy didn't mess with that kind of stuff, which is the good thing, because a six-cylinder suspension will still take the slick rally wheels seen here. Now again, this has been upgraded with disc brakes front and rear, but this would have had 9-inch drums. But again, if this was a Mustang with the base 200 cubic inch 6 and 69, 4 lug wheels, crazy but true. I think 69 or 70 was a final year for the base Mustang having 4 lug wheels. Crazy stuff. But anyway, the classic Camaro lines here, seen for the final time on first generation 67, 8, and 9. Here it is. And nice big wheel openings in the back, ready for big fat tires like these BF Goodrich's radials, but they have the look of an old bias ply, and again, disc brakes tucked away behind there. That's just fine with me. And these things down the bottom, if you're a street racer or if you've been around, these are traction bars. And what they do is they stiffen the front half of the leaf spring, so when you bang gears, it plants the tire instead of axle hopping, which could happen with the stock leaf springs. So that's the outside of this 69 Camaro. Let's look under the hood at that 383, and no, it's not a Mopar engine. Now with this Camaro's 123 VIN, we know it would have had a flat hood because it was a six-cylinder car. But with that said, 69 was the first year for Camaro's factory-installed ZL2 cowl induction hood, but only on Z28s and Super Sports. You could not get this hood on a six-cylinder car or a two-barrel small block. It just wasn't available. But with that said, it bolts right on. Again, America's classic blank slate hot rod right here, the Camaro. Okay, let's pop that hood and see what we have. Yeah, good stuff. Good call. Small block Chevrolet right here. This one's a 383, and once again, as the hood scoop or hood number indicates, that's a 400 crank and a 350 block, giving us 383 cubic inches. And again, unlike a Chrysler 383, which is a much larger, heavier engine, the 383 Chevy, which is not a factory combination, but again, you can bolt it together with factory parts, is a small block, which is nice and light. It's about, probably 110 pounds lighter than a big block Chevy, a 396, and at least 110 or 20 pounds lighter than a 383 Mopar. But this one's been improved even more with aluminum cylinder heads right here. Not factory stuff, but again, the aftermarket is so strong for these cars. You can get aluminum heads, which have bigger ports and valves, make more power, and knock about another 60 pounds off the nose of this Camaro. And one thing you have to remember too is a lot of folks get confused. The VIN is the end-all, tell-all about what engine a car was born with, not this, the cowl tag. Now on this we see a 124 style number, and that's located right here, 124. Now that 4 might say, hey, wait a minute, Steve, that's a V8 car. Well, that's not always the case. We have to default to the VIN. That is what was installed in a car when it was completed. These cowl tags were installed on the body by Fisher Body and then shipped to the final assembly plant. So this here is not really indicative of what the car was born as with an engine. So a little pro tip right there. But again, this one now has the 383 small block under the hood. And I like what they've done. Some plating here, CAD plating on the hood hinges, on the heater housing on the other side, and just a nice tasteful vibe. And again, Griffin aluminum radiator, crossflow right there, keep this motor nice and cool. And if you think this thing looks good, you got to hear it. So stick around to the end of this video to hear this 383 roar to life. Let's look inside. Now, as a self-respecting Camaro, of course, bucket seats up front, nice, with the headrests, which were optional until January of '69, and then cars built after January of '69, mandatory headrests, said Uncle Sam, and we see them right here to help prevent whiplash injuries. Now, this is a automatic car, but something worthy of note, this was a 6-cylinder car. We look here at the quadrant: park, reverse, neutral, drive, low. Wait a minute, 2 gears? Yes, this is a Power Glide car. Now, with Aunt Millie and that 6-banger, the Power Glide was an inexpensive way to have an automatic and not have to use the 3-speed stick. But in a drag racing or a high-performance application like this here, the Power Glide is actually okay. And in fact, the one in this car is rebuilt and modified by a company called TCI, one of the leaders in automatic transmission performance. And with a 2-speed Power Glide, the beauty with that is that in a quarter-mile setting, you often don't need to shift into third. So first, second, and you go through the quarter mile. So a Power Glide actually uses less horsepower than a Turbo 400 or another larger 3-speed or 4-speed. And so you actually have a performance gain with the Power Glide, and we have it right here. Other goodies inside this one, more day 2 stuff, tachometer, and even a line lock down over here. The point of the line lock is basically you get into the water box with the slicks on the back, you hit that thing, it locks the front tires, and then you're free to heat up the rear tires so they're nice and sticky for your pass without burning up your rear brake shoes or pads in this case. And speaking of pads, well, let's look at that rear axle. Now, when we talk about rear brakes, I did mention this car has been upfitted with rear disc brakes, and it's true, a handful of '69 Camaros were built with 4-wheel discs. I think it was RPO JL8 in '69, but anyway, this ain't one of them. But with that said, instead of the brake shoes, inside of the drum, this one has brake pads which squeeze on the rotor behind here. And getting back to that Ford Mustang thing, if this was a 6-cylinder Ford Mustang with the base engine that had 4 lug wheels, well, this Camaro has a Ford rear axle. What? Well, hang on. It's a Ford 9-inch, which is a strong rear axle with the 5 lugs, of course. And the 9-inch is one of the more popular rear axle assemblies for installments in almost anything. It's a strong axle, easy to change gear ratios, drop out the center section, bolt another one in. And again, the strength of, to handle a Boss 429 or a Shelby Mustang, it'll certainly handle a 383 Chevy small block. So again, Ford axle under a Camaro, it's not heresy, it's actually something that's a plus if you want to go drag racing. Let's look inside the trunk and see what we discover here. Yeah, nice and clean. Nice steel trunk floor on this, and unlike Ford Mustang, strangely enough, where the trunk floor is the top of the gas tank, yes, that's how Ford built Mustangs in '69, Chevrolet chose rather to have the gas tank under the trunk floor, which is steel. Either way it works, but with that said, nice solid trunk floor in this one. And again, the D80 trunk spoiler in full effect right here. Made popular by Mark Donohue in the Trans Am series in '68, '69, and absolutely wind tunnel verified. It worked really well to add some downforce to the tail of the car. It speeds over 100 miles an hour. So again, this one was born way back when as a 6-cylinder car, but that was then. And that just goes to show that the Chevy Camaro is one of America's favorite modification machines. You might call it a blank slate. You can paint whatever you want onto it, make it even better than it ever was when new. To learn more about this 1969 383 Power Glide 9-inch equipped 4-wheel disc brake Camaro, check it out on the High Octane Classics website.